Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Today I'll be continuing to look at the list of things Jim Palmer, former megachurch pastor, says that the religious establishment does not want you to know. Today we're looking at, in his list, number 6. And it reads this way. Anything you claim to know about God, even the notion that there is a God, is a projection of your psyche. What you say about God, who God is, what God cares about, and who God rewards and who God punishes, says nothing about God and everything about you. If you believe in an unconditional loving God, you are probably value unconditional love. If you believe in a God who divides people into chosen and not chosen, believers and infidels, saved and damned, high caste or low caste, etc., you are likely somebody who divides people into in-groups and out-groups, and you and your group is at the quintessential in-group. God may or may not exist, but your idea of God mirrors yourself and your values. Probably this particular one was difficult for me to write a script, so I'm not even going to bother to try anymore. And I'm just going to break this one down, and then I'm going to ask 2 questions. Why doesn't the religious establishment want you to know this? And 2, how does this new understanding help our deconversion? How does it help us understand how to deconstruct and reconstruct our lives a little bit? So I want to break it down first. Anything you can claim to know about God, even the notion that there is a God, is a projection of your psyche. That is so true. Isn't it amazing that God always seems to line up or mirror your personality or values in certain ways, okay, or mirrors what you think. Like, I've noted, like, when you have a single woman or a single man, God, or whatever constitutes God, tends to mirror an ideal partner, for instance, or tends to mirror yourself. I think there's I have these thoughts, I have these values, I have these ideas, I want somebody to share them. And I can project somebody in my own mind that shares them, and I can call that God. And so, yes, what you do say about God, who God is, for instance, or gods and goddesses for that matter, what God cares about and who God rewards and who God punishment doesn't say anything about those gods. It says a lot about you, because you're the one that is gravitating, you're moving towards these gods or these God concepts. But what you don't realize is that you're just projecting those God's concepts, and that's what you're attracted to. And the reason you're attracted to it is because like things attract. And so this God has certain values. What he cares about is similar to you. What he rewards this behavior or this virtue, and he punishes this vice or whatever, is all about you, okay, and what you like and what you dislike, which groups you think should be the in-group, which ones you should be the out-group. So he's very right about this, okay? It's a projection. If you do believe in unconditional love, your God is probably going to have an element of unconditional love to him or her. And if you believe in a God who divides people into chosen or not chosen, believers, infidels, saved, damned, high caste, low caste, you're somebody who divides people into in-groups and out-groups. Okay, and there's certain groups of people you don't like and certain groups of people you do like. So your God likes the same groups of people that you like and dislikes the groups of people you dislike. And so God is a projection that reinforces your already pre-existing tribalism. You just use God to reinforce it even more. So I think Jim Palmer here is really hitting on something that is it's not just an intellectual thing, though. I want to stress that. The reason I'm having so much trouble writing a script for this today, and why I'm really not using one, is because there's more of an emotional thing here that you begin to realize. That God may or may not exist is really not the question. The fact that God mirrors yourself and your values is very interesting, because if God is nothing more than a projection, does he really exist in any other place but your mind? Now, that's easy to intellectualize. Okay, a lot of us atheists have come to the conclusion that God was nothing more, especially if we're deconverted from a faith, that God ultimately was just nothing more than a projection of our mind and nothing more than something that we came up with, okay, to kind of frame our own values and frame our own judgments, frame our own personality, really. An imaginary friend that we bounced ideas off of, and lo and behold, they had really good ideas in return because they were our ideas. And so because we naturally think our ideas are better than everybody else's, we are going to say, hey, yeah, man, those ideas are great. God's really thinking ahead, but it's really me, okay? And it's this mirroring that we create with the gods. If you're a pagan, your conception of the different gods is going to be different than some other pagans' conceptions of the gods, okay? Because why? Because you have different individual values, have different. Now, paganism often says, well, yeah, of course. Okay, of course they're projections of what we are, okay? Humanity does create the gods in some pagans' view, okay? And it's belief and worship in those gods that creates them. Okay, so, fair enough point. So they're not as affected sometimes, but it's the emotional level of coming to the understanding that allows you to deconvert from this stuff, okay, if you hear what I'm saying. You can intellectualize, okay, yes, God is a projection of myself. Why doesn't the religious establishment want you to know that, though? Why doesn't it want you to see behind the curtain on that particular aspect of religion, that it's nothing more than a projection of yourself? Because, number one, I think religion plays into that. Okay, when you look at I can only speak from Christianity's point of view because that's what I was involved in, but it's amazing how churches do polls of people, what they want to see in their church. A pastor will go around as he's creating a vision for his church. He'll ask people, what do you want to see? What do you want to see? And what he's really doing is he's trying to get the sense of the values of the congregation. And so he's not only going to just create a vision for the church in that image, he's going to preach the God, that way too, to keep the whole thing attractive to you. I think religion uses this, the religious establishment uses this idea that they're projecting, okay, I need to figure out what God they're projecting so that I can project that in my church as well so that the church is successful. I think that, part of it for the church, for the religious establishment, is pragmatics. It's like, if I understand what people think about God, what they're projecting from their own psyche about God, I can tap into that, and I can use it to make the church more successful or popular or whatever. And that really feeds into that. But the other thing is, if you suddenly realize that God is nothing more than a projection of your own mind, and the only place that God actually exists is in your own mind and doesn't exist in reality outside your mind, the jig is kind of up for any God belief, isn't it, at that point? I think, once you realize this as an atheist, once I realize this mentally, I can, and rationally, I can say, okay, yeah, I get that. I don't, if God exists, it's only in my head. It's why I can sit down and write a fantasy novel and create a whole pantheon of gods that fantasy novel worships. But all those gods don't actually exist, do they? They're just projections of my mind, and now I've projected them onto paper, but do they exist in reality? Hell no. Okay, and the same is true of any, religious god. When you get right down to it, the original God concepts of the Hebrews, for instance, are definitely all over the Old Testament page, and Yahweh is nothing more than one God in many of that area. And they just make the claim that he's the strongest one because it's their deity. And that's a projection. It's a communal, social projection of what God is. Okay? And that's what the religious establishment thrives on. It needs this common societal projection of what God is. And they need to create an emotional attachment to that. And that's why, because you recognize it's all in your psyche, that's also your emotional psyche. What you value isn't just a mental thing. It's an emotional human experience thing, and they tap into that by creating a God that appeals to that projection. It's why fundamentalists are fundamentalists. They're attracted to a God who tells them what to do, who creates strong outgroups that they can hate or dislike or fight against. The religious establishment, absolutely, that religious establishment of any kind of fundamentalism thrives on that kind of projection from the humans that project that way. And that's why they don't want you to see it. Because once you see that it's all in your head, that God is just all in your head, the only place that God exists is in your head. Once you see that, and you can't unsee it, okay, once you realize, oh yeah, the God I've created over here is in my image. And the real trick, like of the Ten Commandments, don't create God in graven images or things like that, because the God Yahweh wants the religious projection of the religion to be the one that you believe in. The problem is that doesn't appeal to everybody, which is why Old Testament religion kind of fell apart a lot of times and ended up in paganism or polytheism or animism or whatever. If you look at it historically, it's why God belief today falls apart, because a lot of churches make the mistake, a lot of religions make this mistake of the only projected psychological God, is only from the psyche of the religious leaders. And the other people are forced, you either believe this, our projection. The problem is their projection of God doesn't line up, and so it causes emotional discomfort, which can lead to people deconverting. And that's a mistake of a lot of religions. I think that's why eventually the Abrahamic gods are doomed in the long run, because there's an accepted projection from the religious leaders and the people that created the religion, and then there's people's actual projection of the God they think exists, and they don't always line up. In fact, I think it's impossible for them to line up. And the religious establishment doesn't want you to realize it's all in your head. They need you to believe that this God is real outside of your head in order to do what they do, in order to recruit converts, in order to get money from the flock, in order to get an ideological in-group that can fight the ideological out-groups. They have to have that. It's why religion and politics go so well together, because religion is very good at creating in and out groups, and politics is very good at taking advantage of that tribalism and putting us against each other as a human race so that we vote one way or the other. Okay, and it's why religion and politics, interestingly enough, seem to have sprung up at the same time in human history. Government and religion seem to be bedfellows that sprung up at the same time when society got too large, that the normal, little things that used to keep people in line, like gossip and shaming and things like that, don't work anymore when people can free ride and get away with it. So we create religion and government in order to stop that. Okay, government to set the rules, and religion to put the eye in the sky, Big Brother is watching you. But if you realize that God is nothing more than a projection of your own mind, Big Brother isn't watching you anymore. And if that happens, religion, jig is up. And that's why they don't want you to know this. For us that are deconverting, there's an interesting problem, I think. I was talking to my therapist on Wednesday about this for myself, because I have a problem where I go out in public and I see people that are in need. And because I used to be a pastor, I'm kind of neurologically trained to immediately go try help them, find some way to help them. And the problem is, as a pastor, I used to do this to my own detriment. I was a big believer when I was a pastor in kind of servant leadership, that I led by example all the time. Problem is, you get burned out that way. I think that's a lot of what happened when things finally blew up in my church in the end, as I was burnt out from being a minister, burnt out from grief, burnt out from a lot of things. Okay? And it just, my whole system of who I was kind of collapsed at that point. And that's kind of what happens when you're deconverting too in general, because once you realize that the God concept is just in your head, mentally, rationally, I can get rid of that idea very, very quickly. Emotionally, I've been trained to project this God as a way of coping, as a way of mirroring my values, so I have this internal conversation about my values. But now, as a person who realizes that it's just a projection, I can realize that I just need a mirror of my values. I don't necessarily need it to be a God. And reflecting on one's values, doing the hard work of one's own moral philosophy, doing the hard work of coming up with your own worldview after you leave the faith, is an emotional roller coaster as much as an intellectual one. And this aspect of the religious establishment is what does that. Because once you detangle yourself from that, the emotional reinforcement of your need for this God that you're projecting goes away. But the problem is the neurology, the way you've been trained, is still there. And so deconstructing is getting over that. It's the emotional hurdles of realizing that this is a projection of not just your mental ideas, your values, your judgment, but your emotional beliefs about God. There's an emotional attachment to this projection, and now that has to go away. And deconstructing that takes a hell of a lot more time. I've been out of the faith. I've been out of Christianity for 9 years. We're in June, which means my belief in God disappeared about 8 years ago. The month of June 8 years ago in 2016 was the month where I walked into it still believing in a deistic God, and at the end of June I didn't believe in anything anymore. It was easy to intellectually walk away from that, but I'm 8 years past all that, and I am still deconstructing the neurological training that I got as a pastor, okay? Because to me, God was a servant-hearted, Jesus says, if you want to be great, you got to be the servant of all. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that's bollocks, okay? Don't get me wrong, you have to have concern for the people under your leadership. That's a good leader. But it doesn't mean you're their servant. It means you're their leader, okay? And that's a different thing. And servant leadership just fails because it burns out the leader. Okay, so it's not a good thing for the leader. Okay, and so the leader burns out, and then the people don't have leadership. And I'm still projecting that a little bit. I don't have a God to project it on, but I'm still having this notion that if somebody is hurting or needs my help, I'm obligated. I have this feeling of obligation. And that came from my projection of who God was. That Jesus was this servant leader that he was. And now I'm like, it's bollocks. It's garbage. It's nothing, okay? But emotionally, I still get that twinge of guilt when I walk away, because I know that I can't emotionally afford to invest myself. And so reconstructing this means I have to learn to be a little selfish from time to time, to realize that I have my limits of what I can do. I can't do everything. That's why human beings have to do things as societies, okay? Because societies can accomplish much more than the individual can. Now, I'm not saying there aren't great individuals that get us rolling, and I think Ayn Rand's concept of there are great individuals in society that contribute more than others is very true. But they should be the tip of the spear and not the whole spear, so to speak. That they should be the vanguard while other people get into that wake. Oh, yeah, this works. Let's make this work. And then you accomplish more than one individual can alone. And you begin to, I had to realize to back off. That's why on this channel I've tried to create the nation, a nation of people dedicated to atheism, normalizing atheism and deconversion, a group of people, a movement of sorts to normalize this thing. Because I've had the comment very recently, that I'm discarding the term atheism because it's really a fight about acceptance. And I said, yeah, that's exactly, to me, that's exactly the point. Well, you're not going to get accepted if you just, as an individual, go out there and do things. And this is all stemming from this projection of God I used to have, and now I'm not projecting any God. And I think I should be okay with that, and people should be okay with that with me, but they're not. And so getting a group of people together to kind of normalize that is kind of is the goal. and then doing it without projecting a God, so that you can all still have your own values, you all can still do everything, but you know what? On this one point we all agree, that a person who is an atheist should not be afraid to use the term and shouldn't be marginalized for it, for being one. And that's not projecting anymore. I don't think it is anyway. It's more of an understanding of breaking down the tribal barriers. And yeah, that's where we're at. So reconstructing is, how do I go forward without this projection of God? How do I constantly Occam razor out this? How do I emotionally retrain myself to not project my God, not have a God to project at all? Yeah, it's a difficult question, but that's enough for today. I think I've got the ball rolling here. I'm very interested in your comments on this one of how to stop emotionally projecting God, even rationally you've discarded God, but you still find these neural pathways where you're still like projecting what you think society should be or what God should be or whatever, and it's a projection of yourself, not necessarily, and it reflects more your values than it does the society or the God you're projecting. I'm very interested in any thoughts on that, so feel free to go in the comments. This is, as always, a discussion starter for those of us deconverting. And, theists are welcome to chime in. Just, behave yourselves. Just, give me your comments, give me your thoughts. This one's a little bit more disjointed because, as I said, I had a real trouble writing a script for this one, so I decided, to hell with it. I'll just go off script on this one because this is a very emotional topic for me personally. So there's that. Just want to thank everybody for stopping by. Thanks for every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are awesome. If you want to support the channel in more tangible ways, of course, membership is probably your best option because it allows me to worry less and less about the YouTube algorithm and ad revenue and all that stuff, and it allows me to focus on the videos you come to love and enjoy. The best way to support any content creator really is membership. And it only costs, here at the Rabyd Nation, it only costs $2 to become a citizen, so, consider that. Super thanks. Super chat are active as always. You also can, share the video with your friends. All those likes, shares, and subscribes help the YouTube algorithm, so that's a great way to help. I'm hoping very soon to have my Amazon wish list, which is basically going to be help the Rabyd Atheist rebuild his atheist library, which I had to leave behind. So we'll see how that goes here. Hopefully it'll be up in a weekend or two, so stay tuned for that. And I've also posted some links in the description for Recovery from Religion and for the Clergy Project for those of you ministers out there deconverting and you're realizing you're more and more an atheist. The Clergy Project is a very valid option for you. So there's that. So that's pretty much all for today. I do want to give a shout out to my existing members, to my citizens, to my Rabyd citizens, to my Tribunes. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome. I appreciate every bit of support that you give, great or small. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go-around and then it's over. So you don't want to waste your time, your money, your opportunities on the trappings of religion and faith, but rather give them to yourselves and to the people you love and care for, and to help make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do so. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.